I was a senior in high school for when I voted for the very first time in my first election. And it was a city election, a local election in Belton. And it was a bond election, coincidentally enough, to build a new fire station. And at this time, Belton had about 13,000 people, a little bit smaller than Minimum Wells now. And it was a contentious election. And if you were a high school student, they set up a polling station in the lobby of our auditorium. And they got a lot of people to vote because if you voted, you got to get out of class early and go down and vote. And it was really up to you if you returned to class, you found your way back to class, or happened to find your way off campus somewhere else. So a lot of us went to vote. And it was a little more low-tech than it is nowadays. Nowadays it's a big touch screen and you tap stuff and you tap a lot of stuff, and after all the tapping you're done and you voted and you go on your way and you get your little I voted sticker. And it was a little different. You walked in, and I don't know if it was because it was so long ago. And a few of you laughed internally when I said that in reference to myself. Or if it was just that Belton wasn't a very big city. But you walked into the booth and there was 2 incomplete arrows. You had to take a marker and you had to complete the arrow to yes or the arrow to no. And that was my first experience of politics as an adult. 18 years old, standing in the lobby, the foyer of our auditorium with a little black Sharpie and a nice little piece of cardboard in front of me, drawing an arrow to one of the measures, whether I was going to vote for or against this bond election, for or against this new fire station. But one of the things that also happened is I walked out of there and I walked back up the hallway towards the parking lot, away from the classrooms, and I was stopped by a parent. And she was fervently against the bond election. She did not think we needed a new fire station, and boy, she positioned herself in just the right place between all of the students and their cars in the parking lot. She was going to let them know. Sadly for her, she positioned herself also in the place that was after all of us had voted. But she let us know very fervently. But really, that was the only impassioned plea I heard about that election, that whole cycle. That whole election season, that was the only impassioned thing. Now, I'd seen the signs around town, and I'm sure there's some that I missed because I was 18, and that wasn't what was important to me. And there are not a lot of 18-year-olds I know where politics is that important, especially local politics. So I'm sure I missed some of the vocalization of sides and that. But what struck me as odd was how angry she seemed. How very angry. But it was like a flash in the pan for my 18-year-old mind. It happened there in the moment, and then it was gone. But that's what a lot of political discourse was like, though, before now. There was passion, there was discussion, there was debate, there was disagreement, because there's always been disagreement. I work in a church. When there's 3 people, there are 20 different opinions somehow. But back then, we made up our mind. And sure, someone was out in the parking lot at the meeting after the meeting grumbling about it. Someone the next day when the results came out when they were unhappy. But we all moved on together. And what's weird is the world seems different now. Things have changed. And I'm sure you've noticed it too. If you look at our political discourse now, regardless of what side of the aisle you fall on, you'll notice the discourse itself, the debate, the discussion, the attitudes, and the behaviors of the people have changed. Everyone's become angry. From my first experience voting, where there was one fervent, angry lady standing between me and my car to go home, and now everyone's angry. That's the clothing you put on when you talk about politics. Outrage. I'm upset about something. Something isn't right. We've got to take something back from someone. We've got to do something about this. Every side, every discussion, everything is blanketed in this large, thick haze of anger and discontent. Now, I don't offer an answer to that. I think that's a problem that's a lot bigger than any one person can answer. But I wanted to invite you to something else this year. We're coming up on the Thanksgiving holiday, and that is going to find a lot of us sitting at tables with family members, sometimes family members we haven't seen in years or months, or maybe since last Thanksgiving. And we're going to be seated across from people we probably don't agree with. So I want to invite you this week, as we go to celebrate the things we're thankful for, to find a refuge against the horrible political discourse we have. From all of the yelling, all of the screaming, all of the outrage. I want to invite all of you this week to take a moment and step back from that and find refuge in our God. To find refuge in the one who gives us blessing. One of the other things that happened when I was in high school, as I've shared with a lot of you, I played tennis growing up. I remember going through school, and I got to middle school, you had to pick a sport or PE, and PE looked really boring. I mean, it looked really, really boring. So I sat down, and not being athletic, I said, what looks like the least athletic sport where I can get my physical education credits? Oh, tennis. They just run around in shorts and swing rackets all around. Not realizing how much running was involved in tennis. There's lots of running involved. But that didn't cross my mind when I was sitting there in middle school. So I sat down the course, and I spent a year in tennis. I was like, man, that's a lot of running. But I felt invested, so I had to keep going. So I just kept playing and doing more running. Still wasn't very athletic, but kept going. Got to high school, and then that's when it got really serious. If you've ever had kids that are in sports or been in sports yourself growing up, you start in middle school, and it's kind of a thing in middle school, but then you get to high school, and it gets really, really important. It's like suddenly you made the big leagues of your little town. And I made the big leagues of tennis. And it was all structured, and the coach sent out a big letter to all the parents at the start of the year. You have to be at practice so many times, and you have to always do this, and you have to wear the right kind of shorts and the right color shorts. And eventually shorts will be provided for you if you got a high enough team, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff, and it seems so big and complicated. But the one thing out of all of that stuff they sent home about this stinking tennis team, there was one thing that stood out to me. And the coach made a point of this. You can only practice so many days a week. Now, part of that state law, we have a board that regulates school sports in Texas. So the University of Scholastic League, the UIL, if you're a teacher, you've heard of that, or an administrator. Now, they actually have rules about how much tennis can practice during the week. But he being our coach, specifically told us you can only practice so much. And we just stood there, yeah. But he had a really good point. Why? Because if you practice every single day without stop, do you know what happens? If you don't ever take a rest, you eventually injure yourself. And this isn't just in tennis, it's in any sport or any physical activity. If you continue to do the same physical activity over and over and over again without break and without rest, you'll eventually injure yourself. Well, me being a smart high school student thought, well, I'm really invested in tennis now. I may as well practice a whole lot and get good at it. So I practiced every day. And once you know, by the second semester I was in high school, I had to sit out for 2 months with an injury. Not because I saved some ball diving into the net. No, because I had a repetitive use injury. The most unflattering, unappealing thing. It wasn't like some football player who could hobble in on crutches with a big cast on his leg and said, I broke 3 spots in my leg getting that touchdown. No. It was, I served the ball too much by myself. And now my wrist and my shoulder hurt a little bit. And the coach says I can't use it. Not the most appealing thing for a high school student to have to explain 100 times. But I want us to think about that, because when we look at the way we handle politics, and we look at that angry discourse we have in this world and this nation now, and we look at all of the yelling and the screaming on the right and the left, all the people trying to appeal to you to vote their way, to support their cause, to do their thing by being angry and outraged. Folks, it's just like being in sports in high school. You can only be in that for so long. Hey, you can never pull away from it. It's not going to injure your shoulder or your wrist. It's going to injure your soul. And I promise you, it's a lot harder to put a soul back together than it is to get over a sprained wrist and a little bit of tennis elbow. It's a lot harder to put a soul back together than watching a leg heal after it's broken, or even rebuilding a home after a storm has come. And I think that's the key to this. For a long time, in our culture, it is savvy and it is the thing to do to look, as the psalmist writes, with our eyes raised up to whatever political leader we follow. The whole first half of this psalm is talking about the relationship people have with God. Our eyes are raised up to you, Lord, like a servant raises his eyes up to his master. So these servants that they're talking about in this Hebrew culture, they would wait and they would watch their master for any need and try to follow up with that need before the master even had to ask. Before the master had to come to them and say, hey, I need this done, they would be watching them constantly to make sure the master didn't even have to ask. The mistress didn't even have to ask. They would be there. They were proactively following the actions of their master, contemplating their steps, that they might serve them better. And the psalmist is comparing our relationship to God to this of the servant and master, saying we should be watching God constantly, looking to see, trying to decide where God is moving, where is His Spirit going, what can we do to be with God where He's going. And I would say, more than not, our culture tells us that it's that political leader on the right or the one on the left. We need to follow them. We need to have our eyes cast on them constantly. We need to have that cable news on constantly. We need to hear that radio talk show constantly. And I promise you, the only person you can have that kind of constant relationship with, that it doesn't damage your soul, is your Creator. If you can't peel yourself away from the news, if you can't disengage from the angry political rhetoric of our day just for a little while, if you read the first part of Psalm 123 and that is how you follow the news cycle, folks, let me tell you, you have your God. And it's not the same one that this psalm is about. And I bring that up now, the week before Thanksgiving, for this simple fact. It's Thanksgiving, like I've said. You're going to be seated across a table from people you don't see often that you probably don't agree with. The temptation will be there. The temptation will be there to follow in line with the political rhetoric and the angry news of our day, regardless of whatever side you're on. And I'm going to tell you, don't give in to it. Don't give in to it. Because the people that we love, the friends and the family that we care about, the folks that we break bread with together are more important than all of the yelling and the screaming that we see on the news from here till kingdom come. Folks, I encourage you, in the face of the anger of our American politics today, just for one day, step aside from that and find your refuge in God. Just for one day. Turn off the news. For one day, turn down the radio. For one day, turn off social media. Probably the biggest offender of our angry political debates. And for one day, just one day this week, be with those who really matter. Be with the ones who choose to be with you. Because I promise you, after Thanksgiving, all the screaming, all the yelling, it's still going to be there. I promise you, after Thanksgiving, our political debate and the climate it is in will not have improved significantly. It'll also not have gone the other way any significantly either. There'll still be the yelling, there'll still be the screaming. It'll all still be there. It'll all be there, waiting in the wings. But that time you have with those who matter, that is something that won't always be there. You should guard it, and you should cherish it. You should find that refuge this Thanksgiving in the God who has made you. Not in the politicians who yell, not in the news cycle who screams, but in the only God who loves us enough to send us His Son. And I promise you, if you can do that, wherever you go, whatever you do, whatever crazy aunt, uncle, or cousin you have to sit by, you'll have a good Thanksgiving. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.